Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named Optimal Leave. The post is titled, "Am I overreacting by leaving my BF because of a joke about his brother sexually assaulting me? I'm at breaking point. I am 29F and have been with my BF, 34 Toby, for 5 years in total. For the past year, we had been trying for a baby with no luck. Eventually, we went for testing. Well, I did and I'm fine, so Toby went and he is infertile. He was devastated. I was more optimistic, saying I was very open to adoption. After a few weeks, he came to me with a suggestion. Toby has an identical twin brother, Tom, and yes, he wanted to get his brother to be the biofather to our baby. The thing is, his brother is a toxic a-hole. He never can get past 3 dates with a woman because he is an a-hole. I've accepted that he will always be in our lives as he and Toby are very close. When I met Toby, Tom was working on the other side of the country and I didn't even meet him for 2 years in person. But Toby is different when with Tom. He's kinda toxic too. There was a point after Tom moved back that he started to make jokes about me, but they were mean, and Toby laughed and joined in. I'm normally quiet and non-confrontational, but I blew up on them and they stopped. But things have not been good between Tom and me since, so I wasn't on board with Toby's suggestion. He brought Tom home with him one night to discuss it with me. I sat and listened, and then Toby made a joke about us making the baby the old-fashioned way as it was cheaper. I said, "No, gross, no thanks." And then Tom said, "How do you know we haven't already had sex?" I looked confused and he said, "When you are drunk, you can't tell us apart, and us brothers like to share." I looked at Toby and he was laughing and nodding. I said that I can tell them apart and I know my BF. But then Toby said that in the dark and being drunk, I wouldn't know. They intimated this had happened in the past. I was very angry. Then Tom added fuel to the fire, saying that he wanted to be there to see our baby being born, and as I shouldn't be embarrassed as he had seen what I have before, then he winked at me. They were both laughing and I just left and went to bed in the spare room. I was furious, and the next day Toby kept it up, laughing and saying, "You didn't know which brother you had." Now I know well I can tell them apart even if they do look very alike, but there have been about 4 or 5 occasions that we did have sex when I was drunk and in the dark. Twice was in hotel rooms after friends' weddings, and the other times were just at home after hanging out with friends. So I'm just unsure. Also, during that fun conversation, Tom also inferred that he and Toby switched places to cover for Toby, but wouldn't say for what. It was to imply cheating, but as I say, I know them apart, but after 2 weeks of them keeping up these jokes, I started to second guess everything. Eventually, I decided to go through all Toby's devices. I needed to know if there was any grain of truth in either of these jokes. I found a text exchange on his iPad where they appeared to be discussing hiding something, but it's pretty vague and the messages don't go back very far at all. This had been eating away at me, and Toby is still keeping up this joke at this stage. Eventually, I planned to try to get his phone as I hadn't looked there. As I plotted, I realized the depths of the paranoia and distress and anxiety I had sunk to. The trust with Toby had just gone, and I told him straight that I was moving out to my friend's house and that if he continued to infer that he allowed his brother to assault me without my consent, I'd be going to the police about both of them. He freaked out. He said it was just a joke and I was taking it all too seriously. I couldn't deal with him and left and went to stay with a friend. I feel I can't tell anyone why I've left him though. He is saying I'm being ridiculous and unreasonable and wants me to come home. He says he will overlook me, threatening to go to the police. Am I being unreasonable? Am I blowing this all out of proportion? I feel I'm so turned around that I don't know. Tom weirdly hasn't messaged or contacted me, and I expected to get nasty messages from him, but it's been total silence from him. What do I do? User Harry Particular said, "Unfortunately, your BF has killed your relationship by planting a seed of doubt in your mind that you can never get rid of. No matter how many times he says only joking, he'll never be able to prove it. I'd also strongly consider taking their confession to the police. Even if nothing comes of it, you will have sent a clear message that there are certain things you don't joke about." User Start 46 said, "Please stay away from them. I don't think they are joking. Why would the man who claims to love you go along with this joke? He showed who he really is. Honestly, they sound like psychos. I would never feel safe around them, let alone bring a child into the mix. Don't feel bad about telling people either, because God only knows how many other women they have done this to. Thank God you found this out before you got married or had kids. I would also rethink going to the police because if this is true, this is rape. User has 422 said, and these guys are in their mid-30s. Yeah, that's full-on creepy. Whether or not they actually did it with you, it's obviously something that they've talked about, thought about, and joked about before. A mature adult in a healthy relationship wouldn't even want to think about something like that. Your ick is totally justified. About a month later, OP provided an update. Just wanted to let you know that I couldn't get past his joke, and no matter how much we tried to talk, Toby wasn't taking any responsibility for the magnitude of what he said. It destroyed all of the trust I had in him. I actually spoke to his sister and older brother, who are both low contact with the twins and their parents, and it's because of how the twins were favored over the other two. I learned a lot, and that neither twin is dominant really. It's more that they are both dominant in different areas and both can be toxic, and it's not a case of Tom leading Toby in this. So really, I decided that I didn't know Toby at all and that he wasn't willing to even accept any responsibility for what he said. So to me, there was no going forward. Toby is not taking the split very well and is getting louder and more obnoxious. The surprise was a seemingly heartfelt, sincere apology from Tom, who said he knew he took it too far and that he didn't know Toby had kept the joke going. He said it wasn't even about me, but that he was enjoying having something over his brother, but that doesn't fit with what actually happened to my mind, so I don't believe him. And that's the key issue. I don't believe either of them and never will again. So that's it. I'm done. I've moved out my stuff completely and I am still trying to make sense of any of it, but can't yet. Am I overreacting to breaking up completely here? I can't see a way forward and I'm no longer even willing to try. Edit. Just to clarify a few things, I did speak to the police after I left initially and after the responses on my first post here. They really felt they couldn't do much, but they did speak to both twins. It was more an informal chat than anything, and Toby was livid. Tom never mentioned it to me, so I don't know how he felt about it. Secondly, what Tom had over on Toby is that he needed him to have a baby. But again, they were totally tag teaming on me that day, and it wasn't one of them against the other, so that was nonsense. Their parents reached out and were very angry that I took a joke so seriously. They seemed to think the most the boys were guilty of was bad taste. I spoke to the siblings after that, and even though I had met them a couple of times, I didn't really know them as they kept their distance. Their brother was very helpful in helping me to understand their dynamic, which frankly is creepy. He doesn't think they actually did share me, but only because they are complete cowards. They wouldn't do something that their parents couldn't bail them out on if need be. He says Toby is all about mind games, and looking at Toby in that new light, I could tell he was right. And that's one of the big issues here. It was the total effing with my mind and sense of reality. I had always avoided them together, but this baby thing brought them together in force and in my face, and I got to see the true Toby. Toby is angry that I could think he would do such a thing, despite him telling me for weeks he did do exactly such a thing. He still wants to work it out, but I can't be anywhere near them. Thanks for the validation and huge wake-up call. I have a feeling none of this would have ended well for me one way or another if I stayed. This next post was made by a user named BestFriendsX. The post is titled, I am 25F and my BF, 26 of 10 months, is best friends with his ex. She refuses to meet me and it's getting weird. I started dating my boyfriend Jeff 10 months ago. This relationship has been amazing so far and I definitely see a future with him. There's just one problem. He has a weird relationship with his ex that's starting to make me really uncomfortable and suspicious. When we started dating, he often talked about his best friend, Jenna, who he also owns a business with. He made it pretty clear that she was an important person to him. I knew they had spent vacations together, and he mentioned hanging out with her parents a few times too. A few weeks after I met him, I crept through all his pictures on Facebook and saw a bunch of very romantic pictures of him and Jenna. I also found her Instagram and looked through it, and it's filled with pictures of Jeff. A bunch of them had the hashtag relationship goals and other similar things. So in this way, I figured out that they had dated. I kept waiting for him to tell me that himself, but he never did. About 2 months after we started dating, I straight up asked him if he had dated her, and he admitted it. He said that they had met in school and had similar ideals and ambitions. They dated for 9 months and broke up a year and a half ago. I asked him why they'd broken up, and he said their relationship was awful and they worked much better as friends. They started their business after they broke up, and things have apparently been going well between them since then. I started to get kind of suspicious about her though when time passed and I still hadn't met her. I met his friends and family pretty soon after we started dating, but I didn't meet Jenna. I went to numerous social events that I'd expect her to be at, but she was never there. There were a number of occasions when our paths almost crossed and I really thought I was going to meet her, but I never did. For example, I went to their office a few times to meet Jeff after work and Jenna was already gone. Or sometimes I'd come to meet him and he'd come outside to meet me so I wouldn't have to go inside. Things started to get really weird about 3 months ago. Jeff and Jenna were having an open house night one evening. Jeff came over to my place after work and we had a few hours to kill before it was time to go. So we went out for dinner and then walked to the office. I was kind of expecting that I'd come in and help them set up, but when we were a block away, he started asking me if I had lots of work to do and saying there was a really nice coffee shop nearby. He actually walked me to the coffee shop and sat me down, then left to go get ready with Jenna. He told me to come to the office in an hour and a half. About half an hour before I left for the office, I texted Jeff and said I hoped everything was going well and asked if there was anything I could do. He replied and said something's come up for Jenna and she can't be here tonight. I was getting really suspicious at this point. I went to the office half an hour later and sure enough, Jenna wasn't there. People kept asking about her all night and Jeff told them she'd had a family emergency. When we walked back to the car later that night, he told me what happened. While he and Jenna were getting ready, she had had a panic attack and said she was scared to meet me. She said she wouldn't be able to handle it and either had to leave or he had to tell me not to come. He told her to leave, so she did. Since then, a couple more weird things have happened and I still haven't met Jenna. Once, when I was hanging out with Jeff, we went to the office so he could grab something. When we were almost there, he looked at his phone and said, "Jenna's still there. Let's just go for a walk." So we walked around the block for half an hour and then came back when she was gone. After that happened, I told Jeff I felt really uncomfortable with the situation. I could respect that they were friends who had dated, but the way she was acting about me was very suspicious. He apologized and said he had actually been really mad at her, but wasn't sure what to do. He also told me a couple other weird stories about things she'd done. He went to a party a few weeks ago and his phone had died that night. When he got home and charged his phone, it was full of texts from Jenna saying she was outside in her car and asking if I was there or not. She actually never even ended up going to the party simply because she didn't know if I was there or not. Now here's the kicker. Jeff and Jenna are currently on a 2-week-long camping trip. They've been planning this trip since before I met him, but considering the way she's behaved, I feel very uncomfortable about him being on this trip. I just looked at her Instagram and she's posted 5 new pictures of him. As awesome as Jeff is, I'm really fed up with this and I'm seriously considering breaking things off when he gets back. The update didn't come until over a year later. In her update, OP said the following: "I wrote my previous post over a year ago and a lot has happened since then. I wanted to give everyone an update, since the advice on this sub was really helpful at the time. For a few months after I wrote my OP, nothing much happened. Jeff and I continued dating and he continued being friends and partners with Jenna. I never met her, but everything else in our relationship seemed to be going so well that I decided I'd try to deal with it. Things got really hard, however, when I had to take a work contract 12 hours away from home for 3 months. I hardly saw Jeff the whole time, and I looked at Jenna's Instagram almost every day to see if she'd posted more photos of them together. More often than not, she had. Since I wasn't physically present, I felt like Jenna was his real girlfriend. I felt completely worthless and constantly stressed out, knowing my boyfriend was spending all his time with another woman who I already had suspicions about. While I was away for work, I decided to break up with Jeff. I broke up with him as soon as I came back, and I made it very clear that his relationship with Jenna was intolerable for me. I told him he was going to have a hard time dating anyone who wasn't her as long as she was still in his life. He kept saying he didn't understand why it was such a problem. He told me he couldn't control her behavior, but he promised me he hadn't cheated on me. I explained to him that by allowing their friendship to continue, he was condoning her behavior. I told him I didn't really even care if he'd physically cheated or not, since he'd already shown disrespect for me and our relationship. I didn't speak to him for a few months and I went on with my life. I took another contract out of town and even considered moving permanently to another city. One night though, Jeff called me and apologized. He said he had been thinking about our relationship a lot and realized he had been in the wrong. He said his relationship with Jenna was beginning to feel toxic to him and he'd made arrangements to dissolve their business partnership. After that, I decided to meet up with him and discuss the situation further. When we met up, he promised to stop talking to Jenna and unfollowed her on all social media. As of now, he has not spoken to her in 6 months, and we've gotten back together. We actually ran into her at a concert a few weeks ago, and they didn't even say hi to each other. I feel much more respected and confident in my relationship now. TLDR, I broke up with my boyfriend. He ended his friendship/partnership with his ex and we have gotten back together. User Catmo said, what I don't get is why was he so secretive about everything at times but then really open other times? Like, I can't imagine being open with my partner about the fact we need to go for a walk because she can't go in the building if Jenna is there. But then also beat around the bush with the whole, don't you have a lot of work to do at that coffee shop over there? If I was upset about my business partner's behavior regarding my partner, I would lay out the entire history to them and discuss Jenna's weird behavior with them every time it happened, like as a sounding board, and talk with them about how to handle it. Everything was so cryptic and hot and cold. Why hide it sometimes? This whole thing was so bizarre. User Sooner70 said, my take. Jenna was Jeff's GF and OP was his side piece. Jenna wasn't avoiding OP. Jeff was manipulating situations to make sure his GF and his side piece never met. In time, Jenna dumped Jeff. Who knows why? Maybe Jenna found out about OP. Maybe the relationship simply ran its course. It doesn't matter. At that point, Jeff cuts off Jenna, pivots to OP, and they live happily ever after. Only one issue. When a mistress becomes a partner, a position opens up.